Okay, let's talk about cooking oil. It feels like we're constantly caught in the middle, right? On one hand, we're told our traditional fats are just bad for us. But then the healthy alternatives can be super expensive, and honestly, they don't always work for the food we love to cook. Vegetable oil is cheap but bad, olive oil is good but pricey, and ghee, well, ghee is for strength, but it's terrible for your heart. It's so confusing. So how do we even begin to make sense of it all?
And this is the exact kind of thing I'm talking about. This is the advice we hear all the time. One minute, something is celebrated as a source of strength, and the very next, it's being blamed for major health problems. You're left just standing in the grocery aisle, staring at the shelves, wondering, what am I supposed to believe?
So what is the real story here? Can we cook our everyday meals, from biryani to samosas without having to worry that we're compromising our health? To figure that out, we first need to get back to basics and actually understand what these fats are and, more importantly, how they behave, both in the pan and inside our bodies.
First things first, fats and oils. They're basically the same thing. Yep. Fat is just what we call it when it's solid at room temperature, and oil is what we call it when it's liquid. Chemically, they're all built from these molecules called triglycerides. And here's the crucial part. It's those three little fatty acids hanging off the main backbone that make all the difference. They define literally everything, how an oil cooks, and how it affects our health.
Now, to make things a little easier, we can group all those different fatty acids into three main categories. Think of them as the main characters in our story today. You've got saturated fats, unsaturated fats, and the one we really need to be wary of, trans fats. If you can understand these three, you've pretty much unlocked the whole puzzle.
And this brings us to the central paradox, the thing that makes this so confusing. Saturated fats, like our good old ghee, are chemically really stable. They're awesome for high-heat cooking. But inside our bodies, they can raise our bad cholesterol. Then on the flip side, you have unsaturated fats. They're fantastic for our heart health, but they're chemically fragile and can break down under heat. So what gives?
Let's zoom in on saturated fats for a second. At a molecular level, think of them as being made of straight, rigid lines. Because they're so straight, they can pack together really tightly. That's why they're solid at room temperature, like ghee or butter. Now, this tight structure is great for cooking because it makes them super stable. They don't break down into harmful stuff when you fry with them. The downside? That same stability means our bodies have a tougher time processing them, which can lead to higher levels of LDL, the bad cholesterol that can, clog up our arteries.
Okay, now for the unsaturated fats. Their structure isn't straight. It has these bends or kinks in it. And because of those bends, the molecules can't pack together tightly, which is why they're liquid oils, like olive or sunflower oil. For our bodies, this is great. They actually help lower bad cholesterol. But that bent structure also creates a weak spot. Those bonds can be easily attacked by oxygen, especially when you apply heat, causing the oil to oxidize and create some pretty nasty, harmful compounds.
And that brings us to our third character. And this one is the clear villain of our story, trans fat. Unlike the other two, which occur naturally, this one is basically an industrial creation, and it has pretty much zero redeeming qualities for our health.
So what exactly is it? Well, trans fat is what you get when manufacturers take a perfectly healthy unsaturated oil and blast it with hydrogen. This whole process is called hydrogenation, and it basically straightens out all those molecular bends, turning a liquid oil into a solid fat. Now, this gives products like Vanaspati ghee a super long shelf life, which is great for business, but it comes at a huge cost to our health. It raises bad cholesterol, lowers the good kind, and ramps up inflammation in the body.
The good news is, because the health effects are so dangerous, many countries are finally taking action. Pakistan, for instance, has moved to restrict industrial trans fats to less than 2% of the total fat in food products, and that is a huge step forward for public health.
Okay, so this brings us right back to our main dilemma. If saturated fats are stable for cooking but bad for our arteries, and unsaturated fats are good for our arteries but unstable for cooking, which one do we choose? What's the more important factor to consider here?
The answer, and probably the most crucial thing to take away from all this, is that the deciding factor is heat. How you cook with your oil is just as important, maybe even more important, than the type of oil you choose. It all comes down to the application.
And this is especially true when we talk about reusing oil. Think about it. The first time you heat an unsaturated oil, its weak bonds start to break, creating those toxic compounds we talked about. Now, if you let that oil cool down and then reheat it later, which happens all the time at street food stalls and even in restaurants, You are literally concentrating all that bad stuff. Reusing frying oil is honestly one of the worst things you can do.
But wait, there's another layer here. Even among the good unsaturated fats, some are just tougher than others. Monounsaturated fats, like what you find in olive oil, have only one of those weak spots, which makes them relatively stable. But polyunsaturated fats, found in things like sunflower and soybean oil, have multiple weak spots. That makes them much more fragile and way more likely to break down with heat.
Now, this is a question I know a lot of you are probably thinking. My grandparents cooked everything in ghee, and they lived long, healthy lives. So why is it suddenly a problem for us? And you know what? It's a totally fair point, but it's missing a huge piece of the puzzle: context.
Their lives were completely different from ours. They were incredibly active, walking for miles, farming, doing hard manual labor all day. Their bodies used the calories from that ghee as pure fuel, and their diets were simpler, based on whole foods without the mountains of processed sugar and refined flour we eat today. We, on the other hand, live largely sedentary lives, and when we eat that same amount of ghee, our bodies don't burn it for energy, they store it, and that's when cholesterol really becomes a problem.
So let's put this all together into a simple, smart guide. If you need to do some high-heat frying, a stable fat like ghee, used in moderation, is a chemically sound choice. For your everyday, moderate heat cooking, a monounsaturated oil, like olive oil or canola oil, is fantastic. When you're using polyunsaturated oils, like sunflower, just handle them with care. Don't overheat them and never ever reuse them. And finally, avoid reused oils and all trans fats, like Vanaspati ghee, at all costs.
You see, there's no single best or worst oil here. The enemy isn't ghee, and it's not vegetable oil. The real problems are overuse, overheating, and using the wrong tool for the job. The healthiest approach is simply a smart approach, understanding what each oil can do and then using it correctly.
Ultimately, the decision is yours. Of course it is. But now, by understanding the actual science of how these fats work, you're no longer just guessing. You can make an informed choice that isn't based on confusing headlines, but on what's really happening in your cooking pan and inside your body. So, what will you choose?